It was just an ordinary day, the kind that gets lost in the constant flow of routine. My name is Luke, and I work as a nurse in a small suburban hospital. The monotony of the days was only broken by the arrival of new patients, each with their own story, their own pain. That morning she arrived, Anna. She had been found unconscious near an old abandoned factory with no identification. Young, likely just over 20, with dark hair and a deathly pallor framing her face. She had no visible injuries, but her health was critical. I began to take care of her, constantly monitoring her vital signs. She was in a coma, but sometimes it seemed as though she reacted to sounds or touch. One evening, while I was alone in the room with her, her eyes suddenly flew open. It was a vacant stare, looking right through me. "No, I don't want to. Leave me alone," she whispered with a voice so weak I thought I had imagined it. "Anna, can you hear me?" I asked. But she closed her eyes, returning to her silence. In the days that followed, my nightly routine turned into a waking nightmare. Every night shift became a journey into the heart of a terror I couldn't manage. Anna's room, once a simple place of care, turned into the epicenter of inexplicable and frightening phenomena. Distorted sounds filled the air without apparent source, and objects seemed to move in barely perceptible motions. The second night, after Anna had spoken, the hospital's silence was torn apart by a harrowing scream. I ran to Anna's room, my heart pounding, to find everything in order except for the fact that she was staring at the ceiling with wide-open eyes, tears of terror streaking her face. "I can't see them, but I can hear them, everywhere," Anna whispered, trembling. "They want me to go with them, but I don't want to." The third night, the phenomenon intensified. Sitting next to Anna's bed, I watched the shadow of an almost human figure twist along the walls, as if something, or someone, was restlessly moving in the room, waiting for the right moment to attack. Every time I turned on the light, the shadow disappeared, leaving me questioning my sanity. "Why me?" Anna cried in the heart of the night, her voice broken by despair. "Why do they want me?" The fourth night was the most terrifying. As I walked towards Anna's room, the hallway seemed to unnaturally stretch before me, each step echoing like a hammer on the floor. When I finally reached her door, I found Anna out of bed, standing trembling with wide eyes staring at the darkest corner of the room. "Do you see them?" she whispered, pointing to the void. "They've come for me." But there was nothing my eyes could see. An inexplicable cold enveloped me, a cold that seemed to drain the warmth from my own body. "I won't let them take you," I said, more to convince myself than to reassure her. But the voice that answered was not Anna's. It was a guttural, deep voice that seemed to come from every corner of the room. "She has no choice. She belongs to us." That night, the hospital lights flickered as if an invisible entity was playing with the building's very energy. Objects in Anna's room began to move on their own, slowly lifting into the air before being hurled against the walls with brutal force. Something ancient and evil had set its sights on her, something not of this world. Every attempt to speak to Anna, to reach her, was interrupted by indecipherable interference, by overlapping voices that belonged to no one in the room. As the nights progressed, my terror intensified beyond my wildest imagination. Anna, caught in a state between waking and sleeping, began to emit unintelligible sounds, speaking in languages not of this world. Her voice oscillated between whispers and wrenching screams. The words flowing from her were a collage of arcane invocations, desperate pleas, and dark threats, revealing an inner struggle with presences no one else could see. On the last night, before a definitive turn, an atmosphere dense with tension pervaded the hospital. The air seemed to vibrate with a subtle and insidious electrical charge. Anna's room had become the focal point of a dark vortex, a portal between our world and a realm of shadows that no human should ever explore. As I approached her room, an inhuman cry tore through the silence, a sound so distressing my steps faltered. Inside, chaos. Objects flew across the room as if struck by an invisible force. The bedsheets were lifted into the air by unseen hands, forming spectral outlines. Anna stood at the center of the room, a few inches off the ground, surrounded by an aura of unnatural light. Her words were a mix of prayer and curse, uttered with a voice that wasn't hers. Sounds that seemed a choir of voices from the beyond. The time has come. Those words plunged me into an abyss of pure terror. The threshold has been crossed. Your fate is now irrevocably tied to ours. Suddenly, terror peaked in an event that defied all logic. Anna's hospital gown disintegrated into a whirlwind of fabric fragments, as if a force not of this world had torn it from her body with unheard of fury. Her figure, now naked and vulnerable, began to levitate above the hospital floor, suspended by an unknown energy. On her skin, a horrific and rapid sequence of lacerations began to materialize, as if countless invisible and sharp blades were precisely incising her. Each cut appeared with superhuman speed, drawing on her flesh a network of wounds that bled profusely. The lacerations were so deep and numerous it seemed impossible they were the work of a human being. As the cuts multiplied on her skin, turning Anna into a living mosaic of pain, her tortured body floated in a spectral calm, suspended by an occult force. Before my mind could fully process the horror of what my eyes were witnessing, total darkness enveloped the room. The darkness was oppressive, and in that suffocating silence, I felt the rustle of something moving around me, a shadow within the shadows. Hisses and whispers crept into the air, words that the human ear should never hear. A deep terror enveloped me, as I realized I was not alone in that darkness. When the lights came back on, the room was empty. Anna was gone. Her wheelchair lay overturned on the floor as if it had been thrown with force. The bedsheets were torn, their ends fluttering in a breeze that should not have existed. From that night on, the hospital was never the same. Every shadow seemed to hide dark secrets. Every echo in the corridor carried the whisper of voices that could not belong to the world of the living. On the edges of my vision, elusive figures move with sinister intentions. Now I feel the cold touch of their non-corporeal hands. And every time I close my eyes, Anna's smile haunts me, a terrible omen promising a fate similar to hers. The legend of Anna spreads through the empty corridors, turning her into an unsolved mystery that grips the hospital. I'm trapped here, besieged by memories and fear, aware that something in the shadow patiently waits for the moment to drag me away into an abyss devoid of light or hope. On a night filled with suffocating silence, a whisper tore me from the edge between wakefulness and sleep. A voice, low but unmistakable, deep and hoarse, terrifyingly familiar, vibrated directly in my mind. Anna is here with us, and now you will follow her.